If history could teach us anything, it would be that private property is inextricably linked with civilization. Ludwig von Mises, economist, historian, logician, and sociologist. All right, welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. For tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. Man, I tell you what, it's Monday morning. We are back with another bill review. Now, what inspired this bill review? Well, there was a video floating around last week, and it was a news article from New York City about squatters. And a woman had a home that she had squatters in. She called the media, she called the police. And well, let's dive in and take a look and let's just watch how this played out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what's going on here in Florida. So, but I want to just kind of show you this New York City because it's particularly bad. Although the one here in Florida was also bad as well. But we're going to play both of them. We're going to see what we got here. So let's take a look and just see what's going on over in New York City.
A squatting showdown caught on camera. It is a scene that highlights how some homeowners across the country are battling squatters who try to use the law to take control of a property. Trevor Alt is here with the story. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, Rebecca. So these headlines come as the NYPD says a homeowner was actually murdered by a pair of squatters that she walked in on. And officials want to avoid potentially dangerous confrontations. But the process of legally removing a squatter can be extremely frustrating and expensive and time consuming. And some homeowners, like the one we're about to see, are fed up.
You shouldn't be trying to steal my house. Yes, you are.
This morning, a squatter standoff caught on camera by our station WABC.
There's a man sleeping right there. Get out of my house.
Adele Andaloro says she inherited this New York City house, but a group of people moved in and changed the locks. The NYPD called in, arresting one man.
Why is it that I have to leave and he doesn't have to leave?
Because technically he can't be kicked out. We need to go to court.
But this man, forcing his way back inside, was allowed to stay. He told investigative reporter Dan Krauth he signed a lease in October, though he showed no proof.
So how does this all end then? When do you leave?
The way it ends is either she pays me my money that I put into the house, pay me the money, and I'll leave, or send me to court, and we deal with the judge in court.
In New York City, squatters have tenants' rights after 30 days, making this a landlord-tenant dispute. So when Adele had the locks changed again...
You're getting arrested right now?
I'm being arrested.
For what?
for being in my own home.
Police then took her away in handcuffs for unlawful eviction. When it comes to squatters, homeowners across the country have to navigate a slew of laws which vary by state. In Chicago, Danielle Cruz told our station WLS when she tried to sell her home in 2022, a woman moved in claiming to have a lease.
So we show up with the cops, and there's a young woman in there with all of her belongings. They said, unfortunately, they couldn't prove that she was trespassing. We have to go to court and follow the eviction process.
But one man is fighting back.
I understand you've been squatting at this residence.
ABC's Jacqueline Lee met with Flash Shelton, who calls himself the squatter hunter.
Is this a growing problem?
I think that it's a growing problem like anything else.
When a squatter took over his mother's house, Flash had her lease the home to him, and then he moved in with the squatter until they left. He's now using the same tactic at other homes.
I would have had a right as a leaseholder to go in, move in on him, put cameras on, and eventually lock him out, and that I could force him to civilly try to fight to get back into a property that he couldn't prove that he had a legal right to be in.
Experts advise always getting an attorney to navigate legal evictions, but warn it can be costly and take several months.
Squatters are looking for an opportunity, and if they think a property is not being maintained or visited, they may make attempts to enter that property that they have no rights to enter in.
And part of the reason this is even possible is because of loopholes in tenancy laws. For obvious reasons, you can't have a landlord be able to change the locks at any time if there's a person who is staying there. Of course, this process can be maddening. And that New York case at the beginning of the piece, that's still unresolved. She will have to go to court to get those people out of her house.
Yeah, unfortunately, it costs her time and money.
It could be more than
and
a year.
even not even be able to have access to your home for a while.
Yeah, after her parents passed. That's the only reason she had.
All right. So, interesting story there. Now, there were some other videos floating around, and they were pointing out some of the things that squatters do. So, if you are somebody, now this isn't legal advice, this is just general, like, kind of tips for you to know. In fact, nothing on this show is legal advice. I'm not even a lawyer. I'm just simply a guy that reads the bills and gives you my impression of the bill. Like, this is what I think of the bill. Right. So nothing ever on this show is legal advice. But there was some videos that I saw, and I don't have them. I'm not going to play them. But they were pointing out some things that squatters do that landlords might be on the lookout for. So, and some of them are kind of clever. So one of the things that they might do is they would scope out and look for properties that appear to be abandoned. And so then what they would do is they want to make sure that the property is truly abandoned, because it's much easier to squat in a home if the homeowner isn't paying much attention to it. So they might go and take like an orange cone and put it in the driveway. And then they would come back like a week later. And if the cone was still there, then they're like, all right, well, nobody's been here in a week. Other things that they might do, they would go in, and then they would kind of maintain the exterior of the property, right? Like they'll cut the grass, maybe do some other things, plant a flower bed or something like that. Why? Well, when the neighbors see that the house looks nice, what does that mean for them? That means like, hey, we got somebody here that at least is making the neighborhood look decent, right? Makes my property value go up. So now they're a little bit less inclined to maybe go and snitch and say, hey, I think there's somebody here. This is one of the reasons why if you're a landlord, it's probably a good idea for you to meet the neighbors and just kind of have a chit chat with them, give them your card, whatever the case may be, right? So that they know, hey, we can call you if there's a problem, right? So these are just some of the things to be on the lookout. And apparently there are people online that will give you tips on how to be a squatter and get around various laws. So what is the case? What's going on with some of these laws? Well, let's play this next clip. This is from here in Jacksonville, and this is what spurred the legislation that we're going to talk about today, which is HB 621 from last year that has passed I believe it's passed the House and the Senate and is now on its way to the governor's desk. And I presume that he's probably going to sign it. So let's take a look at this next video clip. And this is going to talk about a story that happened here in Jacksonville. and we're going to get a sense of what was going on here in Florida. So let's pull that video clip up.
Well, the News for Jack's I-Team is getting results. After our series of stories on squatters, a bill passed unanimously to protect Florida homeowners. Our investigation exposed how a loophole in the law allows squatters to live rent-free in a home for weeks while the property's owner wasn't allowed on the premises.
It gives me a real feeling of positive hope that we still have the ability to discuss challenges in our society and work with our legislatures in a bipartisan way.
As the I-Team's Ann Maxwell explains, this bill would close that loophole, and it's now headed to the governor's desk.
I own the house.
It's been a year since Patty Peoples found strangers had moved into her rental property. They refused to leave, and it was Peoples who was banned from the premises as the case spent weeks moving through civil court. After confrontations,
Your police report says this is under investigation. So with that being said, we don't have to leave anything until the police comes back and tell us what would be the
I have every right to be in this house.
You don't have every right to be in the house at all. You do not.
and threats, the women were evicted,
Stolen washer dryer.
and the house was left with tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage. When Peoples first found those unwanted guests living here, they produced a lease, telling police they were victims of a rental scam. Again, police records show they made the same claim at this nearby house. It took the owners months to evict them. Right around the time they moved in to People's house.
It's just the Wild West. They simply move from one place to another.
Now, state lawmakers have passed a bill to put a stop to it. The bill allows law enforcement to immediately remove squatters who do not have a lease authorized by the property owner. It also adds criminal penalties, designating intentionally presenting a fraudulent lease as a misdemeanor and making it a felony to intentionally sell or lease someone else's property or cause damage like this while squatting or trespassing. The women who made themselves at home here were never criminally charged. Did you ever think we would be at this place where we are today?
Absolutely not. I have never felt more unempowered or hopeless in my life than on March 1st, 2023.
This is your property. It was soon after that Peoples first shared her story with the I-Team. Later, she was invited to share it on national TV.
Chair and members of the committee.
And then in Tallahassee. Are you surprised your story has resonated so widely?
Not really. And I'll tell you why. Because at the crux of this issue is just basic unfairness. You know, if we don't have the right to inhabit our own property, then what kind of world are we living in?
Ann Maxwell, Channel 4, the local station.
All right. So that's pretty wild. Like, I mean, think about that. The woman in the video was like, I'm going to protect my right by bare arms, which as a fundamental principle, I agree with. Like, you should be able to protect your right to property that you either own or have legal access to. You should have the right to protect yourself. I agree with that. But if you're not supposed to be in the property in the first place, then no, you don't have any right. And if you're bouncing around from house to house presenting fake documents, because here's what's going on, folks. And this is why it makes it so challenging. When the police show up, somebody can claim, well, I have a rental document. So if they have a rental document, no matter what it looks like, the police are not the ones to verify that this document is in fact a legal document between those two people. That is a judge's job. It's not the police officer's job. Now, the police officer at best might say, like, do you have this? Do you have a document? If they can't produce one, then you might think of that as a criminal matter. But again, it has to be validated first. So this is the core problem here. Whether you agree that it shouldn't be a problem, like maybe you should be able to produce a document. But then again, if you produce a document, how does the police what option does the police officer have in verifying that, yes, this is a legitimate legal document, and that no, the person claiming to be the property owner is not in fact the property owner. Like that's not within the purview of the police. So this is the loophole that they're talking about. And different states, like they said, have different problems. There was a different video that was going around about the New York City squatter, the woman that got arrested. And in that case, they said in New York City, it could take up to potentially 2 years to deal with that civil matter. Now, let me tell you what that means. That means if I'm a property owner in New York City and it takes me 2 years to deal with somebody who's squatting, that's 2 years that I would be paying the mortgage on the house to the bank and not receiving any income whatsoever. That's a huge deal. I mean, think about, I mean, even if it's only, just imagine if it was only $500 a month, which is totally not the case. But imagine $500 a month, okay, for 2 years. That's 24 months, right? That's $12,000. $12,000. That doesn't include any costs that are associated with repairing the home once you get it back. That doesn't include any legal fees that you have to pay. So you could be paying thousands and thousands of dollars to fight somebody who doesn't belong in the house in the first place. Now, on the other hand, we want to make sure that obviously that landlords are, if they're evicting somebody from the home, they should be evicting them legally, right? Meaning if I'm a renter, then a landlord shouldn't be able to just necessarily evict me beyond the scope of what we agreed to in the rental contract, right? So if the rental contract says like, hey, DL, you need to take care of the property. If I want to come in, and do a check and make sure that these things aren't happening, you have to let me in. You have to pay your rent on time, so on and so forth, right? So like there'll be all these things that, the requirements of me as a renter. And if I'm following those requirements, but the landlord just decides, you know what, I don't really like DL because he's got this podcast, he talks about all this stuff online. And, I'd rather not rent to somebody with those opinions. Well, while I agree that you shouldn't have to rent to somebody, now this is where the law and I differ. I think you should be able to rent to whomever you want on whatever grounds you want, right? Legally speaking. And so if I were to go and rent a home or try to rent a home and the landlord looked me up, they're doing their due diligence and they said, well, I don't like this character guy. I don't like this guy, this character DL. He's a libertarian. I don't like libertarians. They've got these weird ideas and I'd prefer it to be a Republican or a Democrat. Okay, fine. It's dumb, right? And I think you should be criticized for it, but legally speaking, you should be permitted to do it. However, once we've signed a contract, well, a contract is a contract. I am obligated to uphold my end of the contract, the same as the landlord would be obligated to uphold their end. So we want to make sure that landlords aren't just evicting people willy-nilly and violating their end of the contract. So this is where the core of the problem is. Now, because this is the Liberty Dad podcast show and we are about reading things, this is my big thing. I'm like, look, people, you need to read stuff in as much as you can. You need to be educated on things. We're not just going to take it we're not going to assume that that everything that we just saw in that clip was in the bill, because it's great that the news media reports on this and kind of gives us a nice little summary. I'm happy for that. I'm glad they do it. I think they should absolutely follow up and go out to houses and get video, footage of people acting like fools and report on it. All that's great. When they report on bills, as good citizens, proper citizens, we ought to be reading the bills ourselves as much as we can so that we know whether we actually support a bill or why we support it, or if there are elements of the bill that we don't particularly support, then we can make that known to our representatives. And then our representatives, in theory, if they're hearing from us enough, then they would go and say, okay, well, my constituents are having a problem with this particular part of the bill, or they don't like the bill at all. So then our representatives know how they ought vote, or how what kind of amendments maybe they offer. This is why it's important. We don't want what we don't want to have happen, which is what's happening right now, is the media will occasionally talk about an issue, and then it will get picked up by a representative, like what happened here. And then the representative somebody will craft a bill, and then they'll talk about it up there in Tallahassee or wherever, whatever state you're in, the capital of your state, or at the federal level in Congress. And maybe they read the bill, maybe they don't. And then maybe they debate on parts of the bill, maybe they don't. And then maybe they all pass, maybe it passes unanimously or, sufficiently to move forward. And then maybe it gets signed into law. And if all of that happens and nobody's really read the bill, then we've just allowed our representatives to pass a bill that may not actually be any good. Right. So this is why I do the bill reviews, because I want you to see, that you don't have to be a lawyer to have some semblance of understanding. Now, some bills are more complicated for many reasons, right? Some bills, maybe in the process of creating the bill, there's a lot of amending to other current statute. And that makes it a little bit more challenging, because the more that if I were to propose, let's say I proposed a 5-page bill, but it had a lot of changes that were being made to existing statutes, different parts of the statute. Well, that means every change that's introduced could have some interesting effect, right? Like interesting is, like negative or good, right? And we have to know what those are. So it can be complicated in that particular sense. In some cases, it could be that just the issue is complex. And so that maybe you would need to be a lawyer to fully understand, maybe it's relying on a lot of case law or something like that, some historical laws that have been passed, or, rulings that have been made or whatnot. But all of that aside, in most cases, somebody like you and me, who aren't lawyers, unless you're a lawyer watching, but anybody that's not a lawyer that's watching, you can read a bill and relatively understand what's going on, right? And you should be able to read a bill and call up your representatives, email your representatives, go before city council, go to your state legislation, your state capital, and go there and talk to representatives, or, if there's an, public here, where they have public comment, go and speak about it competently. You should be able to do that for most bills. So let's get into this bill, and then let's see what we got going on here. So let's see here. Boop, boop, boop. We're gonna bam right there. Okay, so we got the bill up. And let's see, we're going to skip over this introduction. I don't really need to read all of that. This just kind of tells you, it's like a summary of the whole bill at the very beginning, right? And so we get down here, continuing on with the summary. Summaries kind of be long, like bill does this and this and this and this. It's just really one long giant sentence with a whole bunch of semicolons. So we get down here. All right, so this is kind of like a summary of the bill within the bill. Like what's its purpose, right? That's kind of what we're looking at here, what its purpose is. So we're on page 2, and I'm gonna actually read the bill, because I want you to see how easy it is to read a bill in many cases. All right, the legislature finds that the right to exclude others from entering and the right to direct others to immediately vacate residential real property are the most important real property rights. Totally agree. You should absolutely have the right to exclude others from entering or make them leave if they don't belong there, right? All right, the legislature further finds that existing remedies regarding unauthorized persons who unlawfully remain on residential real property fail to adequately protect the rights of the home or the property owner, and fail to adequately discourage theft and vandalism. Totally agree. We just saw a story of that. Like, this woman tried to get these people who didn't belong there in the first place out of her home. She couldn't do it. It took her months to do it. I think in another news article, a prior one, News4Jax pointed out that she was somewhere north of like $50,000 in cost altogether. The intent of this section is to quickly restore possession of residential real property to the lawful owner of the property when the property is being unlawfully occupied, and to thereby preserve property rights while limiting the opportunity for criminal activity. Totally agree. Think about this for a second. If somebody is unlawfully in your home, you should be able to get them out quickly before they damage things. Because once they start damaging, then it's an additional problem, because you have to pay for it if it's your home that you're trying to live in. Like, let's say you went on a very long vacation, right? You go visit another country for a month, right? You shouldn't have to worry that somebody's going to take your home, while you're on vacation in some foreign country for a month. All right, folks, I'm just listening. What's going on here? Hello? Just think that somebody else, one of the other Liberty fams. Okay. Anyway, so you should not have to worry about those kind of things. And this bill, what it says, at least at the beginning, says that's what we're intending to do. Okay, cool. So let's see if it does that. So now we go on to page 3 here. So we're going to skip down page 3 here. And we are on page 3. I apologize. And I don't have it highlighted because I just want to highlight every single thing. I just want to highlight some of the more important stuff, and then we'll read some of the other things briefly here. So it has in here 8 conditions under which you are authorized to ask the sheriff to help remove somebody. Okay. So here are the 8 conditions. Let's see if they're good conditions. Number 1, the requesting person is the property owner or authorized agent of the property owner. Got it. Like it, right? I own the property, or I have assigned a property management company to maintain it. The real property was highlighted one time. The real property that is being occupied includes a residential dwelling. All right, good with that. Now, if it's a commercial dwelling, that's an entirely different situation. We're just talking about residential today, and I do personally believe that residential and commercial should be kind of kept separate in the statute. So I think this is good that it's only focusing on residential. Number 3, or C, an unauthorized person or persons have unlawfully entered and remain or continue to reside on the property owner's property. Perfect. You're not authorized to be there, and you're not there lawfully. D, the real property. Oops, there we go. The real property was not open to members of the public at the time that the unauthorized person or persons entered. Now, I'm not entirely certain what the distinction would be here. I assume what this means is you didn't have a residential property that you opened up to public. I don't know what situation that might be. I guess maybe if you said, all right, look, all the homeless people, you can come in for the night, or, this week, because it's going to be super duper cold. You can come in for the week. I assume that's what this means, right? Something along that line. But I'm not familiar with any particular stories that this would apply to. Then we go on to E. The property owner has directed the unauthorized person to leave the property. In other words, you told them, you said, hey, you need to get out. All right. Well, moving along, the unauthorized person or persons are not current or former tenants pursuant to a written or oral rental agreement authorized by the property owner. I actually like this line because it separates a squatter from a tenant, because a tenant is a more complicated matter. A tenant actually would have a real, legitimate, enforceable contract. And so therefore, a sheriff shouldn't be involved. A sheriff should say, okay, well, this needs to be determined by the courts, because the court needs to determine, have they overstayed their, overextended their lease? Have they violated their lease? So on and so forth. So then it's up to the judge to identify, all the details about that contract. We don't want police out there looking at the contract between a renter and a homeowner, a property owner, and making their judgment. That's not their job. So I actually think this is good to have in there. Because again, we're dealing with squatters. The unauthorized person or persons are not immediate family members of the property owner. I'm a little on the fence on this one, but I get it. Because imagine imagine my little brother, he's having struggles, and I say, all right, man, you can stay at my house until I'm ready to sell it. I think that creates a complication, right? I shouldn't be having anybody, if I have a spare house that, I need to have everybody under a contract, right? Of a legitimate paper contract that says, even if it's for free, even if I say, look, little brother, you can go here and live in this house. You don't have to pay me any money if I wanted to do that, right? But, here are the conditions under which you can stay there, because now this puts a contract that is enforceable. And even though it does keep it in a civil matter, it makes it very clear to the court what the agreement was and what the agreement was not. All right. And then lastly, there is no pending litigation related to the real property between the property owner and any known unauthorized person. So this one can get a little dicey, because imagine a squatter gets into the property and then somehow they manage to get the property owner involved in litigation. Well, on one hand, you could say, well, this person is still unauthorized. But on the other hand, there may be a question of whether or not they're unauthorized. And it seems like there's a minor opportunity to game the system here. But I think this is addressed elsewhere. So as we go down the line. So let's move down a little bit here to page 6. So we're going to scroll down. We're going to skip over some of this. This is just basically so now where the portion here says complaint to remove persons unlawfully occupying residential real property. So you actually have to use a form that uses this format, and it basically is a document where you're the property owner and you're attesting to all of the things that we just talked about. So all of those conditions, you're like, I'm the owner of the real property or an authorized agent. I purchased the property on the real property is a residential dwelling. So you're just basically, you are formally making a document that's saying all of these conditions are in fact true. It's a residential property. I own it, or I'm the person that's in charge of it. Here, this person here is unlawfully here, so on and so forth. And so you're basically telling the government, you're saying like, look, here's the truth about this, and I'm putting it on paper, because we know if you submit a legal document to the government and you are falsifying information, you could be in trouble. So I'm good with that. I'm very content with this. So we move down the line here to page 6, and here we go. Upon receipt of the complaint, the sheriff shall verify that the person submitting the complaint is the record owner of the real property or the authorized agent of the owner and appears otherwise entitled to relief under this section. If verified, the sheriff shall, without delay, I like that, serve a notice to immediately vacate on all the unlawful occupants and shall put the owner in possession of the real property. Service may be accomplished by hand delivery of the notice to an occupant or by posting the notice on the front door or entrance of the dwelling. The sheriff shall also attempt to verify the identities of all persons occupying the dwelling and note the identities on the return of service. I think that's a good idea. If you are unlawfully in my house and I have to bring the sheriff by to get you out, well, then the sheriff should try to figure out, who are you? Because then we can submit. I'm generally not a big fan of submitting names to the government. But in this particular case, somebody needs to document who that, if it was, Mrs., Jim Jones was in my home unlawfully and I have him removed, we should document that a Jim Jones was in this property so that if he does it again, we can start saying, okay, maybe you've got a history of this and maybe we need to deal with this on a further level, right? If appropriate, the sheriff may arrest any person found in the dwelling for trespass, outstanding warrants, or any other legal cause. Good with that. You violated the law. You're in somebody's home. You don't belong. The sheriff has to come and arrest you. They ought to find out who you are. And then they determine like, oh, looks like you have a warrant for, breaking and entering over here. Well, guess what? Now I'm arresting you. I'm arresting you for trespass. I'm arresting you for this outstanding warrant or other legal cause. Now, I know my libertarian peers might kind of like raise an eyebrow at other legal cause. If there's a legal cause that shouldn't be a legal cause, that's an entirely different matter. So let's say a prostitute has, been in my home and, my property, and I've got, not my home, but my property. She's residing in my property. I find out, I do all my paperwork. I get the sheriff. The sheriff comes over. They find out, oh, she's got an arrest warrant for, repeated offenses for prostitution. Well, that's a separate matter. Yes, she can be arrested for it. And no, that shouldn't be a law in the first place. But again, that's a separate matter, right? So if there are legal causes that shouldn't be, we need to address those. Right now, we're just addressing the person that is in the property that doesn't belong. All right, so moving down the line. All right, so that was the sheriff's involvement. So let's see, page 7. Yep. So now we're going to go to lines 171 here. So this is what happens if you're wrongfully removed. I think this is a good point to bring up. A person may bring a civil cause of action for wrongful removal under this section. A person harmed by a wrongful removal under this section may be restored to possession of the real property and may recover actual cost and damages incurred. Statutory damages equal to triple the fair market rent of the dwelling, court cost, and reasonable attorney fees. The court shall advance the cause on the calendar. Now, we can argue whether it should be triple. I'm comfortable with it because what we are doing is we're saying we are empowering somebody who owns property to remove somebody that doesn't belong. That person, if you own a property, you should know and have all the proper documentation of who does belong there. Or if no one, then no, then, you should be able to prove that you own the property. And then you should be able to provide all the evidence necessary that this person doesn't belong. And if this person does belong, now you can't, if there is a contract in place and you neglect that contract and the person can show, no, if Jim Jones can say, no, DL and I signed this agreement 6 months ago, it's in place for 1 year, and I haven't violated any terms of the contract, and DL is evicting me wrongfully. He's playing a game. He's now trying to game the system and use it against me. Then yes, I should be punished because that is a violation of the contract. The contract does matter. And I should not, in the same way that a squatter should not be able to use the law against a property owner should not be able to fraudulently use the law against somebody that has a legal claim. Hey, what's up? My producer's here, so good morning to him. Right, so that is important. So I'm comfortable with 3 times the amount because that's going to keep people on. It's almost like a lock keeps honest people honest, right? This is what that does. It keeps the property owner honest and it lets them know, have your paperwork in line. Because when we evicting somebody is a big deal, right? Like somebody's living there, it's a big deal. You evict them, they may not have anywhere to go, right? And it's not that I'm sympathetic per se, but I sort of am. What we want to make sure is that if you get evicted, you deserved it. And if you deserve it, then, well, if you have to sleep under a bridge, that's your own doing, right? You should have done better. You should have found a property that that was available to you legally and, made a contract, whatever the case may be, right? Everybody needs to operate legally and honestly. And if you're not, well, then you can have a tough punishment. The punishment may be that you have to live out on the street. But if it's the landlord, then the landlord can have a tough punishment. Everybody can, there should be, you should be able to count on legal recourse, even if it's tough. But if you're abusing the law, then you should equally have a tough punishment. So one last thing that we're going to go on to here, and this is in lines. Let's see here. Nope, no, two last things, I think. So that's the wrongful removal. So we'll go down here and it says any person, and this is on page 10. So our page 9, we're almost done. It's only a 10-page document, so it's very readable. Any person who, with the intent to detain or remain upon real property, knowingly and willfully presents to another person a false document purporting to be a valid lease, agreement, deed, or other instrument conveying real property rights, commits a misdemeanor in the first degree. I agree with this. If the police show up and I tell them this guy named Jim Jones, maybe I don't even know his name, right? This guy doesn't belong there. I haven't rented it to anybody. I'm trying to sell the house, in fact, right? If that's the case, and then Jim Jones says, no, I have a lease agreement right here, right? And maybe he does. And that's an illegitimate lease agreement. Then they need to, because what's going to happen is the moment they provide what appears to be a lease agreement, that starts the process of where maybe the sheriff cannot get involved. Right? Because we discussed that a moment ago, that if there is a contract in place, then the courts need to identify whether or not the contract is still valid, right? If the terms are being met, which part of that means they have to validate whether or not the contract itself is legitimate. And so that creates a space of time that the landlord, the person that owns the property, cannot use the home or sell the home or rent it to somebody else. So they would be losing money on their property. So if the person presents a fraudulent lease, then they should be punished for that particular, because now what they would be doing was they would be forcing the situation away from dealing with squatters to making it once again a civil matter. So it goes from criminal back to civil, which means now you have to go through the courts, and that could be a lengthy process. So yes, you should be held liable if you present a fraudulent document. And if you remember from the story, it appears that the woman that what was her name, Mrs. Peoples, the woman that she was trying to remove from her home had apparently produced fake documents for, I think it was 2 prior homes that she was in. So she was like this serial offender, claiming that she had rights to a property, forcing it to be under a civil matter, and then forcing the property owner to go through all of this additional effort to remove, financial time, all that good stuff, remove somebody that didn't belong in the first place. So yeah, I totally accept this. And then it said, fraudulent sale or lease of a residential real property, a person who lists or advertise residential real property for sale, knowing that the purported seller has no legal title or authority to sell the property, or rents or leases the property to another person, knowing that he or she has no lawful ownership in the property or leasehold interest in the property, commits a felony in the first degree, punishable as provided in, and it gives the statute. I'm good with this too. So let's give the scenario how this might happen. Let's say I own a property. You have Jim Jones, who's a potential renter. And then you have Sally Smith, who is this person who has kind of scoped out the property and has determined, you know what, I think I can get away with making a few bucks by using this property and creating a fraudulent document for Jim Jones to sign. So now Jim Jones might actually believe there's a real contract, a valid contract, right? And so, but it's Sally Smith who is causing the problem. Maybe she's like, hey, you know what? If I can get 2, 3, 4 months out of this, totally worth my time. Imagine that Sally Smith creates a fake document saying, I'm going to rent you this home, Mr. Jim Jones, for $1,200 a month. And then let's say Jim Jones pays her $1,200 a month for up to 3 months before I figure out that, hey, there's somebody in my home my property that I did not authorize. So now what happens? Well, this person does get evicted because they actually don't belong there. However, they still are a victim. So we need to make sure that the victim, even though they get removed, the victim, um, there's legal action for the victim, right? And or on their behalf, right? And we need to make sure that Sally Smith goes to jail because Sally Smith has created this huge problem and benefited monetarily. Now, it turns out that the woman in the story that we watched from here in Jacksonville, it does appear that she was not a victim of somebody else, that she was herself creating these fake. Because I mean, like, really, is she really like is she really falling for like 3 different fake leases from the same person? No. So she's I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm gonna guess that she's probably created these documents herself because it seems very unlikely that she would run into 3 different people creating 3 fake documents that she would sign. And it's also unlikely that after the first time finding out that she would fall for it from the same person 2 more times. That seems pretty unlikely. I mean, like if I sign a document with you and then I find out later you had no right to present that document to me, right? That lease to me. I'm not going to sign the next lease because you clearly got me in trouble with the first one. So I'm totally not going to. So it doesn't make sense that this woman, these 2 women would sign a lease with the same person, 3 different leases from the same person that all happen to be fraudulent, one after another. And it also is unlikely. It's even more unlikely that she would run into 3 different people in a row who are offering fraudulent leases. So the most likely scenario after that is she's creating them, right? But again, if you are somebody that is creating a fake lease and you're causing all kind of havoc like this, then yes, you need to be, because you can't even make the argument, well, I was just looking for somewhere to live, right? Like you can't even, because you are literally toying with people's lives, multiple people. So yeah, felony, totally good with it. So that's the bill review. And this bill goes into the category of bills that I actually support. Okay. And I'm gonna go and look up the number. I started to keep a tally on it, but I don't have it now. But I'm gonna go and research and find out how many bill reviews I've done. But I'm almost dead positive that the number of bills that I have supported have been exactly 3. So this is now the 3rd bill that I'm like very comfortable with it. Could they spice it up a little bit in some areas? Maybe, right? Could they say like, hey, if you created a fake contract, fake lease, and you got Jim Jones evicted, who was an honest person just trying to find a home, right? But they still have to be evicted. Then maybe you owe them some money, right? You owe them the money that they gave you plus some, right? Because if Jim Jones was just an honest guy trying to find a home and you deceived him by using my property, then you owe me and you owe Jim Jones, right? So, that's why I think felony would be good. But if they wanted to add a little bit to that, I would be comfortable with that. And they're not going to now because the bill's it's already passed the House and it's on its way to, I think it passed the Senate as well, or the Senate version passed, I assume. And so now I believe it's on its way to the governor's desk for signing. And I assume that it will be signed, if nothing else, because the Republicans have been they've been throwing out bills left and right. They've just been signing bills. Not a big fan of that. But in this particular case, kudos to them, because this is a problem and we do need to respect private property rights. That is a big deal. And private property owners should have a very quick recourse for people that are not authorized to be in their property, and they should be able to get them out right away before damage is done, because damages can cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And what happens then? Well, if I have to spend $50,000 after somebody who wasn't supposed to be there, that cost gets rolled on to the tenants thereafter. So now it causes the rent to go up. I might have only wanted to offer $1,200, but now I need to offer, $1,400 or $1,500 dollars in order to try to recoup some of those costs. So it hurts everybody involved and even going forward. So it is a real problem, and I'm glad that Florida is dealing with this problem. And so long as the governor signs it, which I think he will, then kudos to them for this bill. It's a good bill. I support it. It's one of the very, very few that you'll find me supporting. All right, folks. Well, time's up for today. I want to thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you found it informative and inspiring. I want you to be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And if you are subscribed, make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to Rumble if you would prefer. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, do me a favor. While you're there subscribing, do me a favor. I want you to leave me a comment. Let me know how I'm doing. Ways that I could improve the show, things that you like, things that you don't like. Say what you got to say. And if you're kind of nice about it, I mean, if you're kind of mean, if you're just like, oh, your show stinks and stupid, I hate it, you should shut down. Okay, maybe I won't respond to you so much. But if you give me some fair criticism and say, I think you could do this and it would be so much more interesting, I'll take it under consideration. Lastly, I want you to remember, if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.